Welcome to this Thursday's Lunch Bite. Thank you so much, Laura, for joining us today to talk about the Northwest Innovation Resource Center, your background in this Amazon Catalyst Challenge that you're actively in right now. And it's just a delight to hear about that and connect with you. So thank you so much for joining us today and leading us in this conversation. So why don't you start us out, if you don't mind, telling us a little bit about the NWIRC and the awesome thing you have in front of you right now.
Yes.
So thank you so much for coming in.
Yes, my pleasure. So the Northwest Innovation Resource Center is a nonprofit organization. We work in the 5 counties of Northwest Washington. And we work with anybody who's starting up or scaling up a business, and we work with them on basically their innovation strategy. That's the goal, is to help them understand how to innovate either their products or their services, whether it's starting up to get to the first customer or scaling up to get to new customers. Our goal is to work in that space of innovation and helping them understand innovation processes and how they can reiterate that within their own business. And we've been doing that for, let's see, about 10 years, I think we've been around. Seems like it's been, I haven't been there that long, I should say, though. I've only been there since 2013, but the organization's been around for a while, so it's been good. Good to see.
And yeah, I think you have such great definitions of and understanding of innovator and entrepreneur. Would you mind sharing with us a little bit about those 2 words and what they mean to you in your work and your life?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I think about the spectrum of what it means, hello, sorry, something popping up on my computer there. So what I think about when it comes to either invention, innovation, or entrepreneur, I think about the scale first of what it means to either invent or innovate first. Invention can be this radically different altering disruptor versus innovation, which can be things that are more systematic. They can be smaller incremental changes that can happen. And honestly, entrepreneurship can happen anywhere along that scale in terms of whether or not you're going to innovate, build a better mousetrap and do something different, or you're going to radically redefine an industry or a service or a product that's out there and invent. It's all about how committed you become to being able to make that happen, because invention, I find, is a lot harder than innovation. Innovation, because it can be small and incremental, you can test waters a little bit more easily versus invention, which tends to require you have to educate your audience about something new. And that takes a lot more time, energy, and effort. I was just having a conversation with one of my clients who's working on educating her users about the product. Everybody sees the need, everybody understands the need, but sometimes that's not quite enough in the world of entrepreneurship to be able to convince a customer to purchase a product.
Awesome. And my goodness, what exciting opportunities you're presenting, both in terms of coaching and work that you do with businesses, as well as now with this new opportunity with the Amazon Catalyst Challenge. So would you share with us about what you're doing with that challenge?
Absolutely. So earlier this year, we started, or late last year, I don't even remember exactly, but we started having these conversations with a program from Amazon called the Amazon Catalyst Program. And they have run these competitions in the past, mostly within universities. Western Washington actually did one last year, and WSU and I think UW have done them. But they really wanted to test the waters to try and get outside of that and see, can individuals who have great ideas share how to go about impacting the world with just their ideas by getting them out there, sharing them, and thinking about whether or not it's something that they can contribute to solving these challenges. So what we did is we teamed up with 8 different cities in Northwest Washington to bring the Amazon Catalyst competition, which is what this screen talks about. This is the page for Amazon and the 8 cities that are involved. Arlington, Bellingham, Bothell, Edmonds, Everett, Linwood, Marysville, and Mount Vernon. These are all within the area that we service as the Northwest Innovation Resource Center, which is just the 5 counties of Northwest Washington. And each one of these cities that's participating chose a theme. So for example, the city of Bellingham chose the theme for ocean health was the theme that they chose. So if we look at the competition theme, shows here that they chose this kind of big, broad theme. And actually all the themes as we look at them are pretty big and broad. With the idea that you can pick to participate in this, you could pick a problem within that broader theme and be able to solve it. So they don't have to compete necessarily. Anybody who's submitting ideas does not have to necessarily compete one-to-one. It's kind of like, how are you solving things in this space, which I think is really great because it allows a lot of opportunity for ideas to flow around how to solve problems in this space. So how the competition works is the 8 cities involved, anybody who is a resident of one of the 8 cities can participate in the competition. We have a list of the zip codes, which I can show you in a moment. As long as you live in one of those 8 cities, you can actually apply to any of the themes. So somebody living in Bellingham with a Bellingham zip code could actually apply to the theme from one of the other cities if they had an idea that fit that theme better. So if I go back and look at what the other themes are, so I mentioned ocean health for Bellingham, Arlington, they chose clean technology that has specifically environmental impacts. So that means that any kind of clean tech products or services. So if somebody in Bellingham's got an idea for how to do clean water technologies using artificial intelligence, great. You could actually apply in both categories if it affected ocean health. You could actually apply the idea to both of these because you can apply more than once. And I'll talk about that in just a second too. So actually I will flip over right now and do that real quick. I'll just go over here to this page, which is the NWIRC page about the competition, which tells you a little bit more about the rules and some of the things that we're doing to help people think about ideas, think about how they might want to participate in this. Each city was given $10,000 to split amongst the top 3 ideas from submissions in that theme. So that means there's up to $10,000 for each city to be able to give away. And I'll show that breakdown in just a second too. So a couple of things that are really cool about this. Again, you can apply to any theme, not just your city, any theme that, any idea that fits with your theme. I mentioned eligibility by zip code. I have a link here on this page that you can go to, and these are all of the zip codes that are eligible. So as long as you're in one of those zip codes, you can participate. Mentioned you can apply more than once. If you've got more than one idea that you want to test the waters on, great, you can do that. You can apply to more than one theme. So if your idea can apply across multiple themes, you could actually apply to multiple themes. You might change up your focus a little bit in terms of the problem you're solving based on the theme. You can form a team of up to 3 people. So if you've got a project that you've been working on with somebody else, or you know other people who would make a good team member, you can do that. Another thing that's really cool about this is the focus of it is just on the idea. You'll see when I show you the application for it, it is not complicated at all. And it is not about your business plan. You don't have to show financials. You don't have to do anything. It's about getting an idea out there. That's it. Ideas can be product and services. They're still yours to pursue after the competition. Nobody's trying to take it on from you. It's up to you to decide what you want to do with it. And then the NWIRC is here to help. As the sponsor for the competition, we are able to help people if they've got things that they're thinking about, but they're not sure if they should apply. That's what I'm here to help people think through and help them ask questions about their submissions. So I mentioned $10,000 in cash prizes amongst the top 3 ideas in each city. That's $5,000 up to $5,000 for the first place, $3,000 for the second, and $2,000 for the third place prize. You can actually win more than once. If you can't win for the same idea, so you can't win in the same theme, but you could actually win in other themes. You can win as part of a team as well if you form that with somebody else. On this page, we also have just a same link that goes back. All of these go back to the Amazon Catalyst page, so you can learn more about the themes there. But here you can see what all of the different cities are and the themes that they picked. I think one of the most interesting themes is Edmonds with the creative sector, because this was designed to be kind of a very big, broad, open-ended topic. That could be anybody who's got ideas for art installations that could go into a city that are somehow going to help with the economic recovery. That's the focus of it. Doesn't have to specifically be COVID related, or doesn't have to be social justice related, although it could be either of those. This could also tie into architecture. It could tie into technology. There's, kind of all different things that you could think of. Everett picked healthcare. Linwood has transportation. Marysville is streamlining manufacturing, and Mount Vernon is all about the food supply chain, which we had a really great presentation that was given yesterday by the former head of launch marketing for Amazon Go. And she was talking about, all the different elements of the food chain and where you're able to actually look at disrupting that and coming up with an idea to help solve some element within it. I mentioned that we're here to help. These are the different things that we have up and running. We've done a series of these innovation insight talks that you could go back and watch some of the ones that have already been done. We do have a couple more coming up. Next week, we have Mark Rubel, who's a entrepreneur. He's an investor. He's an advisor for startups out of Seattle. He used to work with GE Ventures, Ericsson. He's really understands the 5G network. Intellectual Ventures is another company they work for, so he's really, really well connected. And he wants to talk about just what are the opportunities for innovation in the future, especially as we work on the economic recovery. And then if you got questions, you can book a time with me, and I'm happy to help answer your questions. So I'll just switch back over real quick, and then anybody's got questions, I'll be happy to answer those, or we can talk more about why we're doing this. But I wanted to just show you on one of these. All of the pages look the same for all the different cities. So the competition theme, the frequently asked questions are the same. What is Amazon? Why is Amazon doing this? That's a question that we get a lot of. Why is Amazon doing it? It's because they have a culture internally of being able to innovate and say, be curious. And actually, it was really interesting in the conversation yesterday in the Innovation Insights, having had somebody who worked with Amazon. She said, we really embody that, and they really encourage that. And they wanted to see if there's a way to kind of bring that culture out to just general public and get them to start thinking about ideas. Ideas don't have to be related to Amazon in any way. This talks about when the submission period is. It started in June. You've got until July 31st to be able to submit something. You do have to be 18 years of age or older and live in one of those zip codes. And this is how the proposals will be evaluated. So innovation ingenuity is the big category. Are you being and thinking differently? But again, to that question you asked me earlier to kind of define innovation and entrepreneurship and invention, innovation ingenuity doesn't have to necessarily mean that it's on the scale of invention and something really difficult and hard. If you have something that's a simple idea, sometimes that can be enough to have a big impact down the road. 2 weeks ago, we had an angel investor from Element 8, or E8 as they're called now, which is a clean tech company that focuses only on clean tech innovations. And he was talking about how they had a company that they worked with that solved one element in battery storage, and the impact of it is huge down the line. So sometimes little problems are your best bet for solving things. Is it viable? Is there a community impact? Because this is a regional competition, we want to make sure that there's some impact to the community. If it's something you can scale globally, great. But let's talk about how it's going to work here first. That there's a solution that fits with the problem, and that there's some relevance to the theme. So I'll just show you real quick the application. You can see, again, it's a pretty lightweight application. I think the total number of pages that it winds up being is like 2. So it's not a lot of information. You're not giving a lot of details. You talk about the idea, what it is that you give it a title. You have a one-liner description that goes along with it. And this is where you really get into which problem are you addressing within the theme? What's your solution, and why is this solution really important now is something that they're going to ask about. Amazon talks about the 10-time element. They want to see something that's going to move the needle in some way. And I tell people, when you think about a 10-time element, it doesn't have to mean that it goes like this very quickly. It can mean that it goes like this. It can be the 10-time impact over 10 years. But again, back to that point I was talking about with the clean tech thing, they solved one problem in there. The impact shortened the amount of time that it was going to take for solar panels to be able to retain enough battery storage. And so it shrunk a time frame significantly. So that can have an impact. Benefits, who's going to care about your solution, and who is your customer, and why now? That's it. That's the application. So it's a really short, you got a lot of opportunities to put a lot of ideas out there, a lot of chances to win. I will say one last thing. The rules are down at the bottom of the page. Always a good idea to read the rules. A lot of questions can be answered just by reading through them. So if you have questions about it, you can feel free to ask me at any time. I'm happy to help and see if I can answer them in any way. Did I cover it all? I think so.
Yeah. Larry, would you tell us a little bit about why this type of thing matters within our community? Why does a challenge and an investment in a possible prize matter? And what do you hope to spur through that investment?
Our focus has always been, as an organization, our focus has always been to find opportunities to show that this region really has the ability to innovate, and that these great ideas for changing things, for improving our communities, can come from anybody. Having worked with literally hundreds of ideas that have come across my desk in the last 7 years plus, actually. I've been doing this a little longer than that, not with the IRC, but before. I mean, these are just a lot of times average everyday people who just have some idea that's come to them that they don't have any particular expertise in how to do artificial intelligence. They have an idea that if they can find some of the right people, they'll be able to make it happen. And I think that's something that's really important to be able to showcase, is that anybody can come up with the idea, and that this region has a lot of resources that are available to help people when they come up with that idea and figure out what to do next. And of course, as we're moving towards economic recovery and trying to find ways to reinvent our economy in a lot of ways, especially because Snohomish County, for example, is one of the hardest hit when it comes to unemployment because of Boeing and the loss that triggers when Boeing start losing jobs. It goes back down the chain very quickly. They're one of the hardest hits with one of the highest unemployment rates now in the state. And so that's a really big deal. And we've got to find ways to be able to reinvent what we're doing in this area. And innovation is really the key to how you get through and rebuild economies. Got to be able to innovate, come up with new ideas.
Yeah. Wow. Cool. Well, I'm going to have to set up a time to meet with you, because my family and I have been working on something that I don't know if y'all are familiar with what biochar is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard about it.
So there's a lot of momentum around biochar, and I spent the last 2019, I spent in Costa Rica at a rural education and sustainability homesteading kind of place. So we used and produced quite a bit of biochar there as ways of storing carbon in the soil, but also as really an agricultural amendment. And long story short, with carbon, or with biochar, is of course that it could play a pretty enormous role in reversing climate change. It's one of the solutions described by Drawdown,
Right.
And so we've mapped out the sort of relationships and business models that might be needed to accomplish that here in Washington State, primarily along the Cascade Corridor.
Yeah.
And it'd be really interesting to kind of do the silly grin test with you and see what thoughts you'd have about where we're at with it. But yeah, it's something that could play a part in not only getting people back to work, particularly in places that are like deep in deeper into the Cascade mountain range where the unemployment is hit harder because of the resource extraction requirements and sort of like economies that weren't really functioning properly in the first place.
Right.
Yeah, so kind of a cool thought.
Yeah, no, that would be, I would love to hear more about it. I think one of the great things, whenever somebody brings an idea to my perspective is always, there's no bad ideas that are really out there. It's always a question of, is it the right time? Is it the right idea? Is the right place and the right people to make it happen?
Yeah.
And there've been a lot of these ideas that I've seen floated over the years, and you just can tell the timing is not quite there. And what I think is great about now, if I can have a positive for what's going on in the world right now, is that we're seeing how quickly restrictions and regulations can be brought down to be able to implement change quickly. I mean, we've seen that with, being able to allow restaurants to serve alcohol to go. We've seen that with schools being able to say, all right, we're going to have to figure out how to make this whole Zoom thing work and fail as we go, which is all good too. But
creativity loves constraints.
Yes. And so being able to say now might be the time for those opportunities to come up. The conversations that I've had, and actually the one next week, just in having previewed it with Mike Rubel, who is involved in a lot of investment firms out of Seattle, he's talking about how, their perspective on what's going to change in terms of investment is interesting, and where it's going to come from. So I don't want to say too much because I know it's going to be a really interesting conversation based on some of what he's been talking about. But I also saw that GeekWire put out an article just a couple of days ago that investment and investment dollars from venture capitalists was super strong the first half of this year. They didn't get slowed down much at all. Now, they invested in some very specific things, but that's the opportunity if it's the right time for a lot of people who are looking at those things right now.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Well, that's awesome. That certainly spurs me to, I think, when you're when everything's on the slide, right, it becomes very difficult for people to escape the scarcity mentality of we're very like loss averse creatures, right? We have a bias towards loss aversion. And so as we're losing, right, as things are going down, our options are getting restricted, money's flowing out without money coming in. Those dynamics cause people to withdraw and play very conservatively.
Oh yeah.
And yet there's a certain inflection point where perhaps there's an opportunity to pick up right at the bottom, where if things are near the trough or at the trough, you might be able to pick up on, right? Like what you're talking about, where maybe a loosening of restrictions or a lack of competition or new problems identified that don't yet have solutions. That's kind of the exciting sort of co-conspirator to this whole thing, is that perhaps there's a light at the end of the tunnel for those who are trying to do new and interesting stuff. Get it out there, get it going, break the stagnation that, organizations just become stagnant over time, and that is a good way to, I don't know. Yeah, that's what disruptions do.
That's exactly it. And that was from the beginning. I've always known disruption is a great innovator. The reality is that I think to some degree disruption can be even more so a great inventor, because those constraints that typically stop invention are the ones that I see the falling dominoes happening for people, for being able to actually find a pathway in where before they couldn't. And because innovation could be more incremental, you can make those changes in little ways over time, even when things are good.
Right.
Some of those dominoes have fallen as well to allow innovation to accelerate a little bit more quickly as well. But I see a lot more people who are not necessarily for the Amazon Catalyst competition, because I haven't seen yet what people are submitting for that, but just in terms of what I'm seeing in terms of new ideas that are getting thrown out there, that in the past I've seen people sort of, poo-poo, no, that's not ever going to work. And now people are like, okay, let's talk about how are you going to use airflow dynamics inside of an airplane to be able to create basically a tent around yourself on the airplane to keep moving particles through the airplane, which doesn't happen right now. You know, people would laugh at that before, but now not so much, because saying, you know what, maybe we do need that.
Yeah, I even think back to like the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, that was actually like the birthplace of like modern sanitation in the United States. Something that was so disruptive, killed so many millions of people, and the outcomes of it were significant. And people probably thought that at one point that sanitation on a city scale would be impossible or just too monumental an effort. And what it took was circumstances that were really out of people's control to force something like that. So perhaps whether it's like disruptive climate innovation type stuff, I think that strikes me as one of those places where if there was anything that we could do right now that we could take advantage of this inflection point, that would be one of them, right? Some sort of big deal stuff there.
I think there's actually three things that I see as being that have the greatest potential right now as things stand. But when it first started, so if we think back into March, climate change was one of those, because we actually had a conversation in one of the earlier talks on ocean health about how the climate changing is actually creating more pandemics and will continue to create more pandemics. And so we have to be aware of that, because we're releasing a lot more microbiomes into the air as a result of melting ice caps, et cetera. So that's one of those pieces of climate change has got to have some serious implications in terms of how we're going to try to combat some things. So I think climate change is one of those that has a golden opportunity now. Education is another one. You could actually see the radical reform happen that's been needing to happen, but people have sort of been in this, we don't really need to get people online to learn yet. Yeah, we do. And the third one, which was completely unexpected to me, but given the beginning of June, the social justice change that could happen, and really looking at and addressing inequality, which also speaks into education and how we've glossed over the fact that as much as we're all going, we can get education up online, one of the big hurdles has been inequality and the ability to be able to gain access to technology. Which has prevented so much of the leapfrog that needs to occur in education to get people either to an online version or some hybrids or really changing how people are learning.
You know, Meg, I wanted to ask you something that kind of, sorry. Did you have something to say?
So thank you so much. We're at the 12:30 mark, and I'm super happy to stick around for any Q&A, and all are welcome to. Can you remind us real quick, in case people need to hop off, how they get to the website to check out the different submissions, and just tell us quickly about those options?
Yeah, so if you want to look at the Amazon Catalyst competition, you can look at catalyst.amazon.com. All of the different cities are listed there. You can also go to competition.nwirc.com, and that will be the page that has a link to the zip codes and more information about the competition in general. And then if you want to get a hold of me, you can go to nwirc.com. There's a little box on the front page, enter some information. It sends an email directly to me. That's probably the easiest, fastest way.
And where are you based?
I'm in Bellingham.
You are in Bellingham. Wow. Okay. Cool. Sweet.
Well, thank you so much for coming today, and just for all your work generally in helping to really amplify our entrepreneurship and innovation community. I'm totally going to stick around and happy to help facilitate any questions you have. But if you're not able to stick around, folks, have a wonderful day.
Great. So I do have a question for you that kind of ties into some, and it's a little bit to you, but also to you, Meg. I think a lot about how the knock-on effects of the risks of being in public spaces have pretty dramatic effects for universities, because, and NPR had a thing on this talking about how a lot of universities, Harvard and Stanford being some kind of classic or some large examples of this, where they're saying we're going to have a completely digital year, and the price of the tuition isn't changing.
Yeah.
And for 2021, and then a lot of universities just trying to figure out how they're going to make ends meet, right? And universities have gotten significantly more expensive in the last like 10 years. I remember there were a number of like major tuition hikes that occurred while I was at Western. And a lot of what is expensive about a university to run are the huge capital asset investments that they have in their structures and in basically large, expensive things that you have to maintain. And so, and of course, personnel too, but personnel is going to be the same across any organization. And I guess as less people are going to college at this particular time, it raises the price, right? Because if less people go, you've got to raise tuition to make it more expensive eventually. And so I kind of wonder, and I wondered about this when I was at the university too, what the future of education looks like as state-run and private education, private institutions find it more and more difficult to define what it is that they do that is different from Khan Academy. And I don't know, it's kind of a nebulous question, related to like, because I mean, I don't know that I could do online classes exclusively, but what is it that the university does different?
I am curious I'm curious, Meg, about your opinion working in the space. I was a former teacher. I used to teach at Western. I taught at Whatcom because I have a master's in geography. And so that was my life before entrepreneurship. And so I have a continuing fascination to know what's going to happen in education. And I actually read a really good article, I think it was in The Economist, from a guy who is an economist, I think at MIT. And he was talking about this, exactly what's going to happen and what are the opportunities. And his big thing was, this is big tech's opportunity to come in and radically redefine what it means to have a university. Because the points you made about you have capital structures which are super expensive, but it's really hard to keep justifying to somebody, you're going to pay full tuition and not get the online and not get the on-campus experience that's going with it. And that's going to have to change. They're going to have to do something different. I'll see if I can find that article and I'll send it to you.
Yeah, I'd love to see that. Meg, what are your...
Oh gosh. Well, I'm certainly the university experience is changing. I'm super excited. Part of, this series and then just amplifying our conversations is that we're launching a totally different format of education to the community. And so we're doing 10 classes next year that are 1 credit or 2 credit, or some of them are 9 credit classes, but they're absolutely they can count towards your undergraduate degree, but you can be post-grad. You can take them as a proxy to an undergrad program. You could take them just a huge variety of different potential target markets. And I think that people are going to reach more for learning on demand. And I've been testing this out. I'm taking I've been taking a lot of learning on demand type things, and I'm taking one that's like an official learning on demand class from Stanford right now. And what I'm noticing that I'm missing, and one of the things we've heard in our market research, is that even if people are studying online, the idea that, you and I might have similar community needs. So it's super cool to be able to still be local, even if it's online. So knowing that we're in the Pacific Northwest, and then that there are also people potentially joining in from around the world, but that we belong to like a closer, more intimate network with one another, just like naturally by virtue of our geolocation or our interests, but like being known as a student and important as a student, important as a human, I think is something that within, liberal arts education, we've really worked on, and is so natural and innate to those of us that teach in the university system, which is like that layer of personal, approachable, applied work is, I worry about that exiting. So I'm super excited about our 10 classes this year that are essentially every Friday next year. You can take a class from 1 to 4 with us. and they're all like super applied. All the work that you do is in the class or optional additional stuff, and just to see, you know, how we might really change the nature of how we think about entrepreneurship and innovation education, and just seeking to really build a community and a conversation and like a co-working space together. And I think a lot of people, like Lara and I were talking about this, like a lot of people that have been a while into their careers, or maybe got an MBA or maybe an undergraduate degree, really want to refresh their skills. I'm hopeful we'll have, you know, people that aren't necessarily fully interested in a 4-year college degree, but want to participate in some continuing education. Like, I think we'll have a broad swath of customers. But yeah, absolutely, like the process is going to change. And I just got a notice that the State Department is considering not renewing visas for students who are not having to attend in-person classes. So that's going to be super interesting as well, in terms of like, what's the nature of the communities that usually are populated by, you know, if a big part of our, even just, you know, our diversity and our tuition burden is covered by international students, and having them in our community is so very important to the, you know, texture of what we learn. How do we make that work for them to have a study abroad experience, or meaningfully participate in a, you know, US based education system if they're not able to enter the country?
Wow.
I did just see that Harvard is now going to sue the administration to try to stop that. Like, when, I don't know, but.
Well, you know, this is an interesting thing, because I know that through the Idea Institute, one of the big value propositions that I discovered, because of course I was there as everything was really dynamic. I'd say probably like the first 4 of the E6s were all, maybe first 3 were really, really dynamic. Didn't really know exactly if this was part of a bigger thing yet or not. And then by the time E5 and E6, it was like very much a structured thing, still an evolution, but very much like, okay, we have a structure that we're following here, right? And I think one of the value propositions that I discovered in that was one of the value propositions that still sort of sticks to me about university, which is that a lot of what you're paying for is the networking. A lot of what you're paying for is like building of connections with people and repertoire. And so it seems to me that if university is going to retain a value proposition that isn't just like, we're going online, because then if it's online, I'm just going to go to Khan Academy. Like, I'm just going to go to I'm going to Brilliantly, I can go to, you know, there's so many. I remember I taught myself business calculus using Khan Academy when I was at the university. And that was the moment where it clicked, where I was like, well, wait a second. This is free, you know? And then the other part of it too is like accountability that comes from being in a class setting for people that struggle to learn independently, or for people like me who on the neurodiversity spectrum demand a bit of like structure from my learning environment. That there's still some value proposition there, but it's a brave new world in terms of what college education has looked like, because boy, even if it's from Harvard or Stanford, the sort of like piece of paper that people always joke about that you get from the university starts to look really flimsy if it's all online. I mean, just, I don't know.
Yeah, it's really different. So I think that like building that intimacy and network is one of the things that we're definitely definitely
Y'all do a great job of it. I mean,
oh, well, thanks. Yeah, working on it. It's it enters into, like Larry, you were saying earlier, one of my like life passion areas is looking at issues of like the digital divide and access and fairness within education. And you know, this quarter we certainly saw instances of that, particularly in K-12. But you know, we had some bridges that we could gap at Western, like with computer rentals and, you know, access to lower cost internet and things like that. But it was super challenging for a lot of students to connect. And so the digital divide topic in terms of like being really deeply involved in your network and community is going to be really important, I think, throughout K-20 education. It just amplifies that difference, I think.
And if we don't solve it, if we don't look to particularly address it, then inequality is going to grow, and that's not a good thing either. So it's got to get addressed as long as this is going to continue.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I do see articles popping up frequently that there are people who are looking at it and trying to figure out how to address it. There are tools that have been around, surprisingly, that for things like, one of the challenges we have is being able to do collaboration and have effective collaboration tools, where in innovation processes like design thinking, it's really hard if you don't have a whiteboard full of sticky notes to kind of move things around. And that's been one of our big hangups in being able to go as an organization completely digital, is because there just aren't great tools for that. And they're
such an easy thing, right?
Well,
like
there actually are
whiteboard.
Well, they do, some of those pieces do exist. It was just that nobody was able to find them because there wasn't a call for it, right? We didn't have that pressing need that said, we got to be able to do this and we got to be able to do it effectively. But that's what we're working on.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Is my voice coming through really badly?
No, you're great. Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, Donna, right?
Yeah. So,
cool.
Yeah. This has been such a great insight as to how other people think, which is wonderful. But I think, in my opinion, right now, is people don't think like us. And so I love the feedback, Brian, that you give, that you're just like, what? People don't think like us. We don't think like us. And that's why this has been so great. So I'm excited. Maybe it's because it's my first call. But I am excited to hear so many opinions and good information. And I would love to share this with my audience.
Yeah,
absolutely. Any way that I can.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll be, before Monday, we'll be putting the recording with all the links and information on our website. And I can share that with you too, whether to link it or however you want to do that. And Lara, maybe, I don't know, maybe if you want to put the video also up on your website or somewhere, but Donna, I will totally tag you and send out the content once we're all set with the recording and everything. So
that's good conversation.
Yeah.
I love it.
Thank you. Cool. Well, I hope everyone has a super wonderful day. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, that's fun.
Super fun. And yeah, we're looking forward to every Thursday, 12 to 12:30 lunch bites throughout the summer, just covering a variety of different entrepreneurship and innovation related, and then just broadly education related topics.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right, everybody have a good day.